if the market has said to them, we are not interested in games right now that don't have a very diverse mentality, then that's not some agenda. That's the market going, we're at a place in our lives that this is just like people who released disco in the early 80s. It was like disco sucks. But it doesn't mean the music was bad suddenly that was good in 1979. It just means that the taste had changed.
I'm with you, but I don't feel that that's the case here, because what they're taking is properties that this doesn't have anything to do with Days Gone, but they take properties, whether it be Gears, Halo, even Spider-Man, and what they're doing is really trying to push an agenda within those games because they know they have the core crowd, and then they throw in this progressive stuff in there, and they know they can get away with it. And
there's no getting away with it. That's, like this guy who wrote Guardians of the Galaxy. He's like, this is just, we like telling progressive stories. Somebody in the chat right now.
The game or the movie?
The game. The lead writer of the game tweeted to me and said, I have never been given any kind of messaging or diversity,
it's
guidance.
Not that.
I know you're saying it's not that, but what he's saying is where it's coming from. He's giving you an answer. He's saying it's coming from the place that, as a lot of us in the industry, we like telling those kinds of stories. Caveman says some people fail to understand that majority of people in creative fields are liberal leaning. It's not an agenda, but it's just how they think.
I'm actually glad you said that. Can I make this point? How do you think that if somebody had real conservative Christian values or whatever, that they're most likely going to be hired by Sony?
Do you know?
Probably not.
Hang on. Do you know one of my biggest concerns? I shit you not, because I had just come off God of War and I was still at Sony, I think. When we heard who was going to replace Shuhei, and they said, oh, it's Scott Rhodey. Now, I had never, if I had met Scott Rhodey, I didn't remember it, not because he's not a memorable guy, but I wasn't a networking kind of guy. So I may have met him once or twice, but and all I heard about Scott Rhodey for the first couple of, weeks was, he's real religious though. And I was like, oh, fuck. Because I was
look at you. See, you're part of the problem.
No. And I was like, I hope he doesn't, say suddenly all of our games can't be violent and they can't say bad words and they can't be sexual, because that was my bread and butter with all the shit I had been making. And Rhodey's like, no, he has his own values, and he's, a lot of people associate Christians with good morals. I think it's dumb, because a lot of Christians are assholes, just like a lot of people, regardless of your religion. But Rhodey is what you expect a good Christian to be. He is honest. He is forthright. He is kind. He is just a fair, good human being, and I like him a great deal. But he never brought any of his religious thinking, as far as I could tell, to the job. It was never that. He was just like, no, he's working.
What was his position?
He was and remains the head of PlayStation America.
Oh, okay. I mean, I don't know why he's not hired. Again, maybe he doesn't want to deal with the Twitter people. Maybe it's the people working within Sony are going to give him problems, like the trans
problems for what? The guy's greenlit the God of Wars. He's greenlit Days Gone. He's greenlit Last of Us. I'm talking about
recently. There's been a major paradigm change within the past. Since Trump got voted in or whatever, in the past 4 years. I mean, look at what Gears of War was, and look at what it is now. They have like a barista as like the head of that game, as the main character now.
I don't think
who wants to play as that.
I love that game.
They made a Spider-Man game for PS4, right?
It was great.
It was great. Most of it was great.
Yeah, I didn't finish it, but it was what I played was great.
But you gotta play as Mary Jane. What if that doesn't scream agenda? What guy?
Can I just can I suggest
it'd be a great idea to play as Mary Jane? That's what the fans want.
That is okay. Can I suggest you may not just be smart enough to have this conversation with me?
Okay, I mean, you're wrong. I'm schooling you, but go ahead.
Can you define what schooling means? Does it mean saying things that make no sense? Because if it does, you're
schooling. How does that not make any sense?
Do you understand? Okay, let me tell you. No, let me give you the answer. Okay, the game is probably the best-selling Sony first-party game of all time. It's sure. Okay, so clearly a lot of people, they got something right, okay?
But they didn't market that. That's something you found out later on.
Let me finish. It has a very high completion percentage compared to other games. But beyond that, they brought in Marvel Studios created Marvel Games, which is run by a former comics writer who's about the biggest fanboy I've ever seen a video of Marvel, named Bill Roseman. He gave a great speech at DICE a while back. Great, I don't know him, but he's a great expresser of the love of Marvel. Anyone who reads Marvel and is a fan of Marvel, not just the games, but the movies and the comics especially, knows that what makes Marvel special is the fact that it's not just guys in tights beating up on each other. It's the human aspect of those characters underneath all of the action. It's the reason when Steve Rogers grabbed the hammer of Thor in Endgame, the entire audience all over the world lost their shit. It wasn't because it was a cool piece of CG. It was because that guy, Steve Rogers, represents something to the world in terms of who we want to be in ourselves. That's what makes Marvel so great, and to a large extent DC. So to act like the reason Mary Jane was playable was an agenda versus going, hey, you know what? If I make Mary Jane playable and it's good, I do what the comics did. Peter Parker, short of maybe the Flash, has the best supporting character cast of all comic book characters. You got to offer some real evidence to suggest that Mary Jane is in that game because she's a woman. That's ridiculous.
She's playable in the game. Her whole arc is a feminist arc. First of all, she's not even the Mary Jane in the. They turned her into Lois Lane because in 2000, when that game come out? 18. Yeah. You can't have a beautiful girl be a damsel in distress. It can't happen. So they got to turn her into Lois Lane. And what's her arc? The subplot is, she keeps going on these dangerous missions.
Yeah.
And she's sick and tired of her boyfriend who has superpowers going out of his way to save her. And by the end of it, she gets proven right by saving Spider-Man and saying, you see, I just want to save you sometimes. Okay. It's ridiculous. It's bad writing. It hurt the game. Is it a great game overall? Absolutely. If you talk to 90% of the people who played that game, they will tell you that everything regarding Mary Jane was the worst part of that game.
Okay, let me
I
hang on.
Clip it, put it on your channel.
No, because
I guarantee 90%
you
of people
can't. That's not going to work, P Turtle, and it's not going to work because I agree with you. Mary Jane was the worst part of that game, but not because it was the character Mary Jane, but because I didn't buy a game to play stealth missions. I don't like stealth. I'm
talking about the story aspect too, not just her.
Well, you got to.
Story. Okay, everything revolving her was lame. Everything.
Let's assume you're right, though. I don't think you are, but let's assume you're right.
You know I am. That's why I get angry.
On the life of myself and my children. No, I don't. Here's what I think actually is happening. I think, and again, you're getting into a really deep well of things that I'm certainly not qualified to speak about, but I know enough to know this is driving a lot of it. You have a lot of people, mostly men, who still control everything, certainly control entertainment for the most part. And they are waking up. Unfortunately, it's taken many, many centuries, but they are waking up to the fact of, oh shit, there's a lot of us who have really made life shitty for other people, specifically women. Okay. And in that, we want to do better. Now, I think that is a wonderful change that's happening to society. And if you don't, you're an asshole. Okay, if you think women should be treated lesser than men, you're an asshole.
Oh, I think they should be treated different from men, not lesser.
Anything that's not equality is what I'm saying. If you're like, okay,
I just think our definitions of equality are different.
Okay, well, then that's pretty important. But the bigger point, though, is you've got a lot of men who are in agreement with this philosophy of like, hey, shit's not fair, and we want to make things better. And hang on. Yes, I agree. I don't know if they overcompensate in terms of their intentions, but I think they overcompensate because it is a very hard problem to solve. And the idea that a guy who's just grown up as a geek with comics and maybe didn't talk to a lot of girls growing up, and I mean, who the fuck knows, is just like kind of ham-fistingly expressing their take on it, and it doesn't come across as wonderful writing, I would say, okay, that could be realistic, but that doesn't mean that the intention behind it is bad. Then just complain about the writing. Don't complain about the agenda.
Well, I think they go hand in hand.
No, they don't.
I think that agenda does not belong in certain things. I'm not saying it doesn't belong in games, but I'm saying in certain properties. I don't think you should have a woman named Kate who looks like a barista leading Gears of War when the original trilogy was about a gang of brothers.
I'm not going to get it. I'm not going to. You've heard me. I've heard you. I'm going to move on. Pete Turtle, call back anytime. It's always great to talk to you, buddy. I got to go.
Always a pleasure, Jack.
All right, man. That's Pete Turtle off into the evening.